They were the richest and most powerful military order in the world. They answered only to the Pope. They created a banking system that made them the envy of kings. And then on Friday, October 13th, 1307, they were gone. King Philip IV of France, deep in debt to the order, ordered the arrest of every Templar in the kingdom. They were charged with heresy, tortured into confessions, and their Grand Master was burned at the stake. In just a few years, an institution that had stood for nearly 2 centuries was wiped from existence. But was it? What happened to their legendary treasure? Where did their surviving knights and their powerful fleet go? Were they really heretics, or were they guardians of a secret so profound it could shatter the foundations of the church itself? The story of the Knights Templar didn't end in 1314. It just went underground, leaving a trail of mysteries that still puzzle us today. Number 21, did a dying grandmaster curse a king and a pope? You know, it's a story that sounds like it was ripped from a dark fantasy novel. On March 18th, 1314, Jacques de Molay, the 23rd and last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, stood on a small island in the Seine River in Paris. He was about to be burned at the stake. For 7 years, he had been imprisoned, starved, and tortured. He had confessed to heresy under duress, but now, facing death, he recanted it all. He proclaimed the innocence of the order, and with the flames licking at his feet, he supposedly uttered a final terrifying curse. The legend says de Molay shouted to the crowd, his voice carrying over the crackling fire. He summoned both King Philip IV of France and Pope Clement V, the 2 men most responsible for his demise, to meet him before the judgment of God within a year. It was a bold and dramatic final act. And here's the part that sends a chill down your spine. Pope Clement V died just 1 month later, on April 20th, 1314, reportedly from a nasty intestinal disease. Then King Philip IV, the powerful monarch who had orchestrated the Templars' downfall, died on November 29th of the same year after a hunting accident. Both men were dead within the year, just as the curse supposedly predicted. So did it really happen? Historians are divided. The most famous account comes from the chronicler Geoffrey of Paris, who was a contemporary and claimed to be an eyewitness. His version of the story is vivid and detailed. He wrote that de Molay warned the Pope he would appear before God's tribunal in 40 days, and the king within a year. The timeline fits, but other official records from the period are strangely silent. No other major chronicler mentions a curse. This has led many mainstream historians, like Malcolm Barber, author of The Trial of the Templars, to suggest the story was an invention. It was a legend that grew after the deaths of the Pope and King, a way for people to see divine justice in what was otherwise a brutal political maneuver. It was a good story that made the Templars into martyrs and their enemies into villains punished by God. But the legend refuses to die, it's too perfect, the timing is just too precise. The idea that a man's final words could carry such weight is powerful. Some theories go even further. They suggest it wasn't a supernatural curse at all. Perhaps it was a threat. Was it possible that surviving Templars, operating in the shadows, carried out the curse themselves? A bit of poison for the Pope, a hunting accident for the king. This would have been an act of vengeance, disguised as divine will. The Templars had a vast network, and many members had simply vanished after the arrest in 1307. They certainly had the means and the motive. The curse may have been a public declaration of a death sentence, one they intended to carry out. The curse also had long-term consequences, at least in legend. Like Philip's 3 sons all ruled after him in quick succession, but none produced a male heir, ending the Capetian dynasty. This led to a succession crisis that helped spark the 100 Years' War with England. Some even connect the curse to the French Revolution, with a legend claiming that when King Louis XVI was guillotined, a man jumped onto the scaffold, dipped his hand in the king's blood, and yelled, "Jacques de Molay, you are avenged." This is almost certainly folklore, but it shows how deeply the story of the Templars' final stand has been woven into the fabric of French history. What are we still asking? Was the curse simply a legend created after the fact to give the Templars a tragic, righteous ending? Or was it a real threat, a promise of revenge carried out by a secret network of surviving knights? Could the immense stress of the situation, combined with a dying man's curse, have created a psychosomatic effect on the king and pope, literally worrying them to death? And if it was a real supernatural event, what does that say about the true power the Templars might have possessed? Number 20. Were the Templars secretly allied with their enemies? On the surface, the Knights Templar were the ultimate defenders of Christendom. Their whole purpose, their very reason for existing, was to protect pilgrims and fight the enemies of the Church in the Holy Land. They were the shock troops of the Crusades, but the reality on the ground in the Middle East was far more complicated than a simple clash of civilizations. For nearly 200 years, the Templars lived, fought, and did business alongside their supposed enemies, particularly the Saracens. This has led to a persistent and unsettling question where their relationships more than just tactical. The Templars were pragmatic, they learned Arabic, they understood local politics and customs. Unlike the fresh-faced Crusaders who arrived from Europe full of religious zeal, the Templars knew that survival in the outermost states depended on more than just brute force. It required diplomacy, trade, and sometimes truces with the very people they were supposed to be fighting. There are documented cases of Templars making treaties with Muslim leaders. For instance, in the 1160s, they had complex dealings with Nur al-Din, the ruler of Syria. This was just smart politics. You can't be at war all the time. But some of their contemporaries found these relationships deeply suspicious. The chronicler William of Tyre, who was often critical of the Templars, accused them of being arrogant and acting like a state within a state. He recorded an incident where a Templar knight murdered an envoy from the Order of Assassins, a mysterious Ismaili sect, thereby sabotaging a potential alliance with the King of Jerusalem. While this shows a Templar acting against a Muslim group, it also reveals that high-level negotiations were happening. It proves they were talking. The most controversial accusations came during their trial. Under torture, some Templars confessed to bizarre things, including that they were taught to revere Saracen leaders. This is almost certainly a product of torture, designed to make them look like traitors. But it planted a seed. The idea that the Templars weren't just making treaties, but were actually learning from and even syncretizing with Eastern philosophies began to grow. Some theories suggest the Templars had a secret, non-aggression pact with the Assassins, led by the Old Man of the Mountain. The Assassins were a feared group known for their political killings, but they were also known for their esoteric knowledge. Did the Templars and the Assassins, two secretive military orders, recognize something in each other? Did they trade secrets, not just blows? This idea is central to many alternative histories of the Templars. Authors, like Robert Lomas and Christopher Knight in books such as The Hiram Key, propose that the Templars weren't just learning military tactics. They suggest the Templars were initiated into a secret Gnostic tradition, a form of knowledge that predated and contradicted mainstream Christianity. This knowledge, they argue, was preserved in the Middle East, and the Templars became its new guardians. In this view, their enemies weren't just enemies, they were also sources of profound spiritual wisdom. They weren't fighting a war of religion, but were secretly on a quest for something much older. While mainstream historians dismiss this as pure speculation with no hard evidence, the questions linger because of the Templars' unique position. They were a bridge between East and West. They spent generations immersed in a culture that Europe viewed as alien and hostile. It's not a huge leap to imagine that some of that culture, some of that knowledge rubbed off on them. They were known to employ local Muslim secretaries and administrators. They certainly respected the military prowess of leaders like Saladin. Respect can sometimes lead to understanding, and understanding can lead to an exchange of ideas. What are we still asking? How deep did the Templars' diplomatic ties with Muslim leaders really go? Was it just pragmatism, or was there a genuine respect and exchange of ideas? Could the Templars have learned more than just battlefield tactics, perhaps absorbing esoteric or philosophical knowledge from Eastern groups like the Sufis or the Assassins? Did this secret knowledge, if it existed, contribute to the charges of heresy that ultimately destroyed them? Number 19. What was the real meaning of their seal? Every organization has a logo, a symbol that tells you who they are. For the Knights Templar, one of their most famous and enduring images is their seal. It depicts two knights, fully armed, riding on a single horse. On the surface, the meaning seems clear. The official explanation was that it represented the vow of poverty taken by the first knights. They were so poor, they had to share a horse. It was a symbol of humility and brotherhood. It was perfect propaganda for an order that started with just 9 knights and a vow to live as poor fellow soldiers of Christ. But like everything else with the Templars, people have long suspected there's a hidden meaning. The poverty explanation works for their early days, but it seems a bit strange for an order that quickly became one of the wealthiest institutions in the world. They owned vast tracts of land, castles, and a fleet of ships. They were bankers to kings. Continuing to use a symbol of poverty when you're fabulously wealthy seems either hypocritical or symbolic of something else entirely. This is where the theories start. One interpretation is that the two knights represent the dual nature of the Templar himself, the monk, and the warrior. They were men of God who were also trained killers. They lived in two worlds, the spiritual and the material. The seal was a constant reminder of this internal balance they had to maintain. This makes a lot of sense and is a more sophisticated explanation than simple poverty. It speaks to the core identity of the order, but other theories are far more radical. Some suggest the two riders symbolize a secret duality at the heart of the Templar belief system. Perhaps it represented the balance of good and evil, or the Gnostic idea that the spiritual and physical worlds were in opposition. In this view, the Templars weren't just Christian soldiers, they were students of a more complex dualistic cosmology. This ties into the heresy charges, where they were accused of worshipping an idol, Baphomet, which was sometimes depicted as having dual characteristics. Another fascinating theory, though it has very little historical evidence, suggests the two riders represent a secret homosexual tradition within the order. The rule of the Templars was extremely strict about chastity and avoiding the company of women. Knights were forbidden from even kissing their own mothers. In such a closed, all-male military environment, close bonds would have been essential for survival. Some have interpreted the intimate image of two men sharing a horse as a coded reference to these brotherly relationships. This was, in fact, one of the charges leveled against them during the trials, the charge of sodomy. While most historians believe this was a slanderous charge used to defame the order, the seal is sometimes pointed to as a piece of circumstantial evidence. Then there's the idea that the two riders symbolize a secret held by the order. One knight is the Templar, the other is the secret he carries. Or, perhaps one knight represents the exoteric, public face of the order, while the other represents the esoteric, hidden teachings known only to initiates. This would mean the seal itself is a message we have a public mission, but we also have a secret one. The horse in this interpretation is the order itself, carrying both the public warrior and the hidden truth. We know the seal was used on official documents, it was their stamp of authenticity. But a symbol can mean more than one thing at once. It can be a public statement of poverty and a private reminder of a deeper philosophy. The ambiguity is what makes it so intriguing. It's a simple image, but it raises profound questions about what the Templars truly believed and what they were trying to say about themselves. What are we still asking? Was the poverty explanation just a cover story for a much deeper symbolic meaning? Did the two riders represent the dual nature of the Templar, or a dualistic worldview that was at odds with Catholic doctrine? Could the seal have been a subtle nod to a secret tradition or a hidden truth the Templars were guarding? Or are we simply overthinking a piece of 12th century branding? Number 18, how did they become masters of international banking? It's one of the great ironies of the Knights Templar. They began as the poor fellow soldiers of Christ. Their very name emphasized poverty. Yet, within a century, they had created one of the most sophisticated and powerful financial networks the world had ever seen. They weren't just warriors, they were the first multinational corporation. How did a band of monks with swords invent international banking? It started out of necessity. Pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land in the 12th century faced a huge problem: the roads were dangerous. Carrying large amounts of gold and silver made you a prime target for bandits. The journey was long, and you could be robbed at any point. The Templars, with their network of preceptories, local commanderies stretching from London and Paris to Jerusalem, were perfectly positioned to solve this problem. They came up with a brilliant idea. A pilgrim in London could deposit his money at the London Temple. In return, he would receive a letter of credit, a piece of parchment with a coded inscription. The code was a cipher known only to the Templars. The pilgrim could then travel to the Holy Land with only this letter. When he arrived in Jerusalem, he could present the letter at the Templar headquarters there and withdraw his funds in the local currency. It was essentially the world's first traveler's check. The Templars would take a small fee for the service, of course. This system was revolutionary. It was safe, it was efficient, and it built enormous trust. Soon, it wasn't just pilgrims using the service. Kings, nobles, and merchants began to use the Templars as their bankers. King Philip IV of France, the man who would eventually destroy them, used the Paris Temple as his personal treasury. The Templars became the de facto bankers for much of Christendom. They loaned money to monarchs to fund wars. They managed estates for nobles who were away on crusade. They acquired vast land holdings, farms, vineyards, and even their own fleet of ships to transport goods and money. Their network was their strength. By 1300, they had around 9,000 properties across Europe and the Middle East. Each one was part of this interconnected financial web. This is where the mystery deepens. We understand the basic concept of their letters of credit, but the full complexity of their financial operations is still not fully understood. How did they manage liquidity across such a vast area? How did they hedge against currency fluctuations between different kingdoms? What kind of advanced accounting and encryption methods were they using? Their records were largely destroyed after 1307, so we are left with only fragments. Some researchers believe the Templars may have had access to financial knowledge from the Middle East, which was often more advanced than in Europe at the time. They were in constant contact with Jewish and Muslim traders who had long established systems of credit and exchange. It's possible the Templars didn't invent their system from scratch, but adapted and perfected existing models. This would be another example of them learning from the very cultures they were ostensibly fighting. Their financial power ultimately became their undoing. King Philip IV was deeply in debt to the Templar order. By destroying them, he could erase that debt and seize their assets in France. Their wealth made them a target. It was easier for the king to label them heretics than to admit he was bankrupt and needed to rob his bankers. The very system they created to serve Christendom became the reason for their destruction. What are we still asking? What were the specific cryptographic methods the Templars used in their letters of credit, and how secure were they? Did they develop complex economic theories about interest, loans, and wealth management that were centuries ahead of their time? How much of their financial acumen was borrowed from Middle Eastern practices? And is it possible that somewhere a hidden ledger or rulebook still exists that details the inner workings of the first great international bank? Number 17. What really happened at the fall of Acre? The year is 1291. The city of Acre, the last Christian stronghold in the Holy Land, is under siege by the massive army of the Mamluk Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil. Inside the city walls are the last remnants of the Crusader states, including the military orders, the Hospitallers, the Teutonic Knights, and the Knights Templar. The defense of the city was a desperate, bloody, and heroic last stand. The Templars were at the very heart of it, and their actions during the siege have been both praised and questioned ever since. The Templars' headquarters was a massive fortress at the southwest corner of the city, jutting out into the sea. It was a fortress within a fortress. During the siege, which lasted for weeks, the Templars fought with legendary ferocity. Contemporary accounts, even from Muslim chroniclers, describe them as the fiercest of the defenders. When the city walls were finally breached on May 18th, 1291, the fighting moved into the streets. While many citizens and other soldiers tried to flee to the harbor, the Templars and other military orders fought on. The Grand Master of the Templars at the time was Guillaume de Beaujeu. He had been warned by the Sultan that the city would be attacked, but his attempts to rally a proper defense were hampered by infighting among the various Christian factions in Acre. During the final assault, de Beaujeu was mortally wounded. According to the chronicler known as the Templar of Tyre, as he was carried from the battle, his knights cried out that all was lost. De Beaujeu replied, "I am not dying, I am wounded," before succumbing to his injuries. It was a moment of pure Templar grit. But here's where the story gets mysterious. After the city had effectively fallen, a large group of Templars, along with civilians, were holed up in their seaside fortress. For several more days they held out. The Sultan offered them terms of surrender. They could leave with their lives and property if they gave up the fortress. They agreed. But when the Mamluk emirs and soldiers entered the fortress to oversee the surrender, something went wrong. Accounts say the Mamluks began to harass the women and boys. The Templars, enraged, turned on them, killed them, and barred the gates again. The fight was back on. This final stand lasted for several more days. The Mamluks began to mine the walls of the Templar fortress. On May 28th, the mines were fired, and a large section of the wall collapsed. Mamluk soldiers rushed into the breach, but the structure was so weakened that the entire fortress collapsed, killing the remaining Templar defenders and the Mamluk attackers alike. It was a dramatic suicidal end. The mystery lies in the details. Why did the Templars fight on after the city was clearly lost? Was it pure fanaticism, or were they protecting something inside their fortress? The Templar treasury at Acre was legendary. It was said to hold the accumulated wealth of the order in the east. Did they fight to the death to prevent this treasure from falling into Mamluk hands? Or was it something even more valuable? Some theories claim the Templars held sacred relics in acres percent, perhaps even the Holy Grail or documents from the Temple of Solomon. The suicidal final stand, in this view, wasn't just about honor, it was about making sure their greatest secret was buried forever under the rubble. Another question is about survivors. While most of the Templars at Acre died, a small number did escape by sea, including the future Grand Master, Thibaut de Godin. They sailed to the nearby island of Cyprus, but how many others got away? Did any escape with a portion of the treasure or the relics? The chaos of the city's fall would have provided cover for a secret evacuation. The story of the final collapse of the fortress is a neat and tidy ending, but it's possible it's not the whole story. What are we still asking? What exactly caused the truce in the Templar fortress to break down? Were the Templars fighting to the death for honor, or were they desperately trying to protect a priceless treasure or a sacred relic hidden within their walls? Did the final collapse of the fortress truly kill everyone inside, or was it a cover for a pre-planned escape by a select few knights with the Order's most valuable possessions? Is the true Templar treasure still buried somewhere beneath the modern city of Acre? Number 16, what was Baphomet? Of all the bizarre and sinister accusations leveled against the Knights Templar, none is more famous than the worship of a mysterious idol head called Baphomet. During the trials that began in 1307, under intense torture, many knights confessed to secret initiation ceremonies where they were forced to deny Christ, spit on the cross, and venerate this strange object. The descriptions of Baphomet were inconsistent, which only adds to the mystery. Some said it was a severed human head. Others described it as having 1, 2, or 3 faces. Some said it was a skull, others claimed it was a statue of a man with a long beard. One said it was a painting of a head on a wooden panel. A few even described it as a cat. The name Baphomet itself is a puzzle. It appears nowhere before the Templar trials. This has led to many theories about its origin. One of the most common is that it was a French mispronunciation of Mahomet, the old French name for Muhammad. King Philip's prosecutors wanted to paint the Templars as traitors to Christendom who had gone native in the East and secretly converted to Islam. This charge would have been shocking to the public and would have justified the seizure of their assets. The inconsistent descriptions of the idol could be explained by the fact that the knights were just making things up under torture, trying to tell their interrogators what they wanted to hear. But other researchers believe there's more to it. Dr. Hugh Schonfield, one of the scholars who worked on the Dead Sea Scrolls, proposed an intriguing theory. He argued that Baphomet was a code. Using the Atbash cipher, a Hebrew substitution cipher, the name Baphomet BPV-MT in Hebrew transforms into Sophia Shi VP-YA, the Greek word for wisdom. This suggests Baphomet wasn't an idol at all, but a symbol of esoteric wisdom or Gnostic knowledge that the Templars had acquired. Gnosticism was a collection of early Christian movements that the mainstream church considered heretical. Gnostics valued secret knowledge gnosis as the path to salvation. If the Templars were secret Gnostics, it would explain why the church wanted them destroyed. Then there is the image of Baphomet that we are most familiar with today, the goat-headed, androgynous figure with wings created by the 19th century French occultist Eliphas Levi. As Levi claimed his drawing was based on Templar symbolism, but there's no historical evidence to support this. He created the image as a symbol of his own esoteric philosophy, combining elements from various traditions. This image has since been adopted by various occult and satanic groups, which has permanently and probably unfairly linked the Templars with devil worship in the popular imagination. So what was the truth? Did the Templars really worship a head? The idea isn't as crazy as it sounds. The veneration of relics, including skulls and heads of saints like John the Baptist, was common in the medieval church. It's possible the Templars had a particularly important relic head that they revered in their private ceremonies. Or perhaps the head was a metaphor. In some Gnostic traditions, the head represented the intellect or a higher consciousness. The veneration of a head could have been a symbolic act of devotion to knowledge and wisdom, something their accusers twisted into idolatry. The archaeological evidence is scant. A few carved heads have been found at former Templar sites, but there's nothing to definitively link them to the worship of Baphomet. The whole story remains shrouded in the confessions extracted under torture. It's a classic, he said, she said, from 700 years ago, where one side was being stretched on the rack while they talked. What are we still asking? Was Baphomet simply a fabrication of Philip IV's torturers, a convenient way to charge the Templars with heresy? Was it a code word for Sophia, representing a secret Gnostic tradition they protected? Or did the Templars actually possess a sacred head or relic that they revered in secret rituals, the true nature of which we can no longer understand? Is it possible the entire Baphomet story is a massive misunderstanding of a complex symbolic practice? Number 15, did they discover America a century before Columbus? The story we all learn in school is that Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas in 1492. But for decades, a persistent theory has claimed that the Knights Templar, or their descendants, made the journey across the Atlantic long before him. It's a wild idea, but there are some strange pieces of evidence that keep the theory alive. The story starts with the Templar fleet. On the eve of the arrests, in October 1307, the Templars had a powerful naval fleet based at La Rochelle on the Atlantic coast of France. When the king's men arrived to seize the ships, they found the harbor empty. The fleet had vanished. Where did it go? The conventional answer is that the ships scattered to friendly ports in Portugal, Scotland, or other places where the king's influence was weak. But the more romantic theory is that some of those ships, loaded with Templar treasure and knights escaping persecution, sailed west into the unknown. Why would they go west? At the time, it was the only direction where they could be sure of escaping the reach of the Pope and the kings of Europe. They needed a new base, a new home where they could rebuild. The Americas would have been the perfect place. Proponents of this theory point to a few key pieces of evidence. One is the Newport Tower in Rhode Island. It's a strange stone tower that has puzzled historians for years, while mainstream archaeology dates it to the 17th century as a windmill built by Governor Benedict Arnold, grandfather of the famous trader. Its unique design doesn't quite match other colonial structures. Some, like the controversial writer Scott Wolter, argue that carbon dating of the mortar supports a pre-Columbian construction date, and that its architecture is consistent with Templar-era round churches or watchtowers in Europe. Then there is the Zeno map, a mysterious map published in 1558 that supposedly shows the North Atlantic. It depicts lands, including a large island called Frylenda and other territories that roughly correspond to parts of North America. The map is attributed to the Zeno brothers, Venetian sailors who allegedly explored the area in the late 14th century, guided by a prince named Zichmni. Some theorists, like historian and author Tim Wallace Murphy, have connected this Prince Zichmni to Henry Sinclair, a Scottish earl from a family with supposed links to the Knights Templar who fled to Scotland. The story goes that Sinclair, with Templar knowledge and navigators, sailed to Nova Scotia and Massachusetts in 1398, a full 94 years before Columbus. There are also carvings and symbols. The most famous is the Kensington runestone, a stone slab found in Minnesota in 1898, covered in runes. The inscription tells the story of Norse explorers in the year 1362. While most academics consider it a 19th century hoax, some researchers believe it's genuine and could be evidence of a land expedition by descendants of the Templars, who may have integrated with Norse communities. In Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, a church heavily associated with the Sinclair family and Templar legends, there are carvings that appear to be maize, corn, and aloe vera plants that were unknown in Europe before Columbus's voyages. The chapel's construction was completed in the 1480s. How could they have known about these American plants? The connection to Columbus himself is also intriguing. Columbus's ships sailed with the red Templar cross on their sails. This was the symbol of the Order of Christ of Portugal, the successor organization to the Knights Templar in that country. Columbus's father-in-law was a former Knight of the Order of Christ. Did Columbus have access to secret Templar maps and knowledge of lands across the ocean? Was his famous voyage not one of discovery, but of rediscovery? What are we still asking? Where did the Templar fleet actually go after fleeing La Rochelle in 1307? Is there any truth to the stories of Henry Sinclair's voyage to America, or is it just romantic folklore? Can the strange carvings at Rosslyn Chapel be definitively identified as American plants? And if so, how did they get there before 1492? And was Columbus's voyage secretly backed by the inheritors of Templar knowledge using maps that were over a century old? Number 14, what is the truth behind the Chinon parchment? For nearly 700 years, the official story of the Knights Templar was that they were condemned by both the state and the church. They were arrested by the King of France and disbanded by the Pope. The papacy, it seemed, agreed that the order was irredeemably corrupt and heretical. But in 2001, a discovery in the Vatican's secret archives turned that history on its head. A researcher named Dr. Barbara Frail stumbled upon a document that had been misfiled for centuries. It was called the Chinon parchment. The document, dated August 17 to 20, 1308, records the proceedings of a papal investigation into the Templar leadership, including the Grand Master Jacques de Molay. After the mass arrests in 1307, Pope Clement V was under immense pressure from King Philip IV to condemn the order. The Pope, however, wanted his own investigation. He sent 3 of his most trusted cardinals to interrogate de Molay and other high-ranking Templars who were being held at the king's castle in Chinon. What the parchment reveals is explosive. It records that the Templar leaders confessed to the papal commission about some of the strange initiation rituals, such as denying Christ and spitting on the cross. But they explain the context. They claim these were symbolic acts intended to simulate the kind of humiliation and denial a crusader might face if captured by Saracens. It was a test of their faith, not an act of heresy. They insisted they believed in Christ and the church with all their hearts. Crucially, they asked for and received absolution from the Pope's representatives. The document shows that Pope Clement V, after hearing his cardinal's report, concluded that the Templars were not heretics. He found them guilty of some serious misconduct and ritual irregularities, but he did not believe they had betrayed the faith. The parchment proves that the Pope formally absolved the Templar leadership and planned to reform the order, not destroy it. He wanted to merge them with the other major military order, the Knights Hospitaller. So if the Pope absolved them, why was the order brutally suppressed and Jacques de Molay burned at the stake? The answer is politics. King Philip IV of France had all the power. He had the Templars in his prisons, and he was running a massive propaganda campaign against them, using confessions extracted under torture to whip up public hysteria. Pope Clement V was in a weak position. He was a Frenchman, and his papacy was based in Avignon, not Rome, making him vulnerable to the king's influence. Philip essentially bullied the Pope. Despite his private findings recorded in the Chinon parchment, the Pope publicly buckled under the pressure. At the Council of Vienne in 1312, he dissolved the order of the Knights Templar, not through a legal verdict of guilt, but through an administrative decree, stating it was for the good of the church and to avoid scandal. He essentially sacrificed the Templars to appease the king and prevent a larger schism in the church. The discovery of the Chinon parchment is a bombshell. It rewrites a key part of the Templar story. It confirms what many have long suspected: the Templars were the victims of a cynical political takedown, not a legitimate heresy trial. The king wanted their money, and to eliminate a powerful institution that challenged his own authority. The Pope knew they were innocent of heresy, but was too weak to save them. The document lay hidden for centuries, a silent witness to a great injustice. What are we still asking? Why was such a critically important document misfiled for 700 years? Was it a simple administrative error, or was it deliberately hidden by someone in the Vatican who wanted the Pope's true decision to remain secret? How many other documents relating to the Templar trials might still be lost or misfiled in the Vatican archives? And does the fact that the Pope secretly absolved them give any credence to modern groups who claim to be the successors of the Knights Templar, arguing their order was never legitimately destroyed in the eyes of God? Number 13. What is the secret of Rosslyn Chapel? Deep in the Scottish countryside, not far from Edinburgh, stands a small chapel that is unlike any other in the world. Rosslyn Chapel is a masterpiece of stone carving, a library of symbols that has fascinated and baffled visitors for centuries. It was built in the mid-15th century by William Sinclair, the first Earl of Caithness. The chapel is so ornate and so strange that it has become the epicenter for countless theories about the Knights Templar, the Holy Grail, and secret knowledge. The Sinclair family has long been linked by legend to the Knights Templar. The story goes that after the suppression of the order in 1307, a group of Templar knights fled to Scotland, seeking refuge with Robert the Bruce, who was at war with England and had been excommunicated by the Pope. These Templar fugitives, it is said, brought their knowledge and their treasure with them and allied themselves with the Sinclair family. Rosslyn Chapel, built over a century later, is seen by many as a testament to this secret alliance. The chapel's architecture is the main source of the mystery. It is covered inside and out with thousands of carvings. There are Christian symbols, of course, but they are mixed with pagan imagery, like the green manna face made of foliage and symbols that seem to come from Norse, Celtic, and even Islamic traditions. The sheer density and variety of the carvings are unique. It's as if someone was trying to preserve a whole system of knowledge in stone. Some of the carvings are particularly baffling. As mentioned earlier, there are depictions of what look exactly like ears of maize or corn. There are also carvings that resemble aloe vera. These are New World plants that were supposedly unknown in Europe before Christopher Columbus's voyages in 1492. Yet, Rosslyn Chapel was largely completed by the 1480s. This has fueled the theory that Henry Sinclair, an ancestor of the chapel's builder, sailed to America in 1398, guided by Templar navigational secrets, and brought back knowledge of these plants. The carvings, in this view, are hard proof of pre-Columbian contact. The chapel is also said to be a replica of Solomon's Temple, or perhaps Herod's Temple, in Jerusalem. The layout, particularly the two pillars at the entrance, named the Apprentice Pillar and the Mason's Pillar, is said to echo the two pillars, Jachin and Boaz, that stood at the entrance to Solomon's Temple. This has led to the theory that the chapel is not just a place of worship, but a stone diagram of a secret spiritual tradition that originated in Jerusalem and was passed down through the Templars. This is a central idea in books like The Hiram Key by Christopher Knight and Robert Lomas, who argue the chapel is a key to understanding the origins of Freemasonry. And then there's the legend of the treasure. The most persistent story about Rosslyn is that beneath its floor, in a sealed vault, lies the legendary treasure of the Knights Templar. This might be their golden jewels, but many believe it's something far more significant: the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, the head of John the Baptist, or even secret gospels that tell a different story about Jesus. Ground-penetrating radar scans have indeed shown anomalies and what appear to be vaults beneath the chapel floor, but the owners, the Earls of Rosslyn, have consistently refused to allow excavation, preferring to let the mystery endure. Skeptics argue that the Templar connections are all modern inventions, popularized by books and movies like the Da Vinci Code. They say the carvings can be explained in other ways. The mise could be a stylized depiction of wheat or flowers. They point out that there is no direct historical document linking the Sinclairs of the 15th century to the 14th century Templars. But the chapel itself, with its riot of unexplained symbols, continues to defy easy explanation. What are we still asking? What is the true meaning of the bizarre and eclectic mix of carvings that cover Rosslyn Chapel? Do the Mise carvings prove that the chapel's builders had knowledge of the Americas before Columbus? Is the chapel's layout a deliberate copy of Solomon's Temple? And if so, what secret knowledge is it intended to convey? And what, if anything, is hidden in the sealed vaults beneath the chapel floor? Number 12 is there a link to the Freemasons? Walk into a Masonic lodge today, and you might see men performing rituals and using symbols that seem strangely familiar to students of the Knights Templar. Some Masonic degrees are explicitly named after the Templars, such as the Order of the Knights Templar. Freemasons often use the Templar cross as one of their emblems. This has led to one of the most enduring questions about the Templars' legacy: did the order secretly survive and morph into the Freemasons? The theory of a direct link is a powerful one. It suggests that when the Templars were suppressed in 1307, they didn't just disappear. They went underground. They used their secret networks, their knowledge of symbols, and their tradition of initiation ceremonies to create a new secret society, or perhaps they merged with an existing one, the Guilds of Stonemasons. The Masons, who traveled across Europe building the great cathedrals, already had a system of lodges, secret signs of recognition, and a hierarchy of apprentices and masters. It would have been the perfect cover for a fugitive order of knights. The story really took off in the 18th century. In 1737, a Scottish Freemason named Andrew Michael Ramsay gave a famous speech in Paris. He claimed that the first Freemasons were actually Crusader Knights who had dedicated themselves to rebuilding the Temple of Solomon and had formed a secret brotherhood. He strongly implied a connection to the Knights Templar. This speech was incredibly influential and helped cement the idea of a Templar Masonic lineage in the minds of many Masons. It created a romantic and prestigious origin story for their fraternity. The evidence for the link is largely circumstantial and symbolic. Both groups were organized into a hierarchical structure of degrees. Both used initiation rituals. Both used symbols like the skull and crossbones, the two pillars of Solomon's Temple, and the cross. The Templars were builders of castles and churches, so a connection to stonemasons seems plausible. The legend of Templars fleeing to Scotland after 1307 is often used to bridge the gap, suggesting they preserved their traditions there and eventually emerged as Scottish Rite Freemasonry. This Rosslyn Chapel with its intricate carvings and alleged Templar connections, is often cited as the missing link, a stone testament to the fusion of Templar and Masonic knowledge. However, most academic historians are deeply skeptical. They point out that there is a huge gap in the historical record. The Templars were officially disbanded in 1312. The first concrete evidence of modern Freemasonry, with its lodges and symbolic rituals, doesn't appear until the early 17th century in Scotland and the early 18th century in England. That's a gap of almost 300 years with no documents, no records, and no proof of any continuous organization. The mainstream historical view, as explained by scholars like John J. Robinson in Born in Blood, is that Freemasonry did not descend directly from the Templars. Instead, the 18th century Freemasons, who were fascinated by history, chivalry, and esoteric knowledge, simply adopted the Templar story. They saw the Templars as a model of a virtuous, persecuted brotherhood and incorporated their legends and symbols into their own rituals to give them an air of ancient mystery and prestige. Right? It wasn't a survival, it was a revival. It was a story they chose to tell about themselves. But the question won't go away. The similarities are just too striking for some to dismiss as coincidence. Was there a secret oral tradition that passed down Templar teachings through the centuries, leaving no paper trail? Did the Templars create Freemasonry as a sleeper organization designed to lie dormant and re-emerge when the time was right? What are we still asking? Is the 300-year gap in the historical record definitive proof that there is no link between Templars and Freemasons? Or could a secret society exist for that long without leaving written records? Were the similarities in symbols and rituals a case of 18th century Masons borrowing from history, or does it point to a genuine hidden lineage? And if the Freemasons are not the direct heirs of the Templars, does any group have a legitimate claim to that title? Or number 11, where did their powerful fleet go? On the night of Thursday, October 12, 1307, the Templar fleet was anchored at its main base in La Rochelle, a major port on the Atlantic coast of France. The fleet was one of the sources of the Order's power. They had ships across the Mediterranean and were one of the dominant naval forces of the age. The next morning, Friday the 13th, King Philip's men swept across France, arresting every Templar they could find. They went to seize the ships at La Rochelle, a prize of immense value, but when they got there, the harbor was empty. The entire fleet was gone. The disappearance of the Templar fleet is one of the most tangible and frustrating mysteries of the Order's downfall. Where did dozens of ships, loaded with sailors, knights, and potentially treasure, go? They seem to have vanished into thin air. There are no records of them being captured or sunk. They just sailed away in the night. This implies one crucial thing: someone had warned them. The supposedly secret royal order for the arrests had been leaked, so where could they have gone? The most logical destination was Portugal. King Denis I of Portugal refused to persecute the Templars. In fact, after the order was officially disbanded by the Pope, he simply reformed them into a new order, the Order of Christ. And they kept most of their properties and continued their mission of fighting the Moors. It's highly probable that many of the ships from La Rochelle found a safe haven in Portuguese ports. The famous red cross on the sails of Christopher Columbus's ships was the emblem of this very Order of Christ, the direct successor to the Portuguese Templars. Another likely destination was Scotland. Robert the Bruce was at war with England and had been excommunicated, placing him outside the Pope's direct authority. Scotland would have been a welcoming place for a force of elite, battle-hardened knights with their own ships. This theory is supported by the legend that a contingent of Templar knights played a decisive role in the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, helping the Scots win a stunning victory against the English. A fleet of ships appearing off the coast and disgorging a fresh cavalry charge would certainly fit the descriptions of the turning point in that battle. But there are more exotic theories. One is that the fleet sailed to a secret Templar base somewhere more remote. Some have suggested an island in the Atlantic, like the Azores or Madeira, which were officially undiscovered at the time. This would have given them a secure location to regroup and plan their next move. And then there is the most speculative theory of all that. The fleet laden with the Order's great treasure and sacred relics sailed west to the Americas. This ties into the pre-Columbian discovery theories. If you have a fleet of ships, a mountain of treasure, and all of Europe is hunting you, sailing over the horizon to a new world that you may have already known about from secret maps makes a certain kind of desperate sense. This would be the ultimate escape plan. The disappearance of the fleet is a major hole in the story of the Templars' destruction. Philip IV got the knights in France, and he got their land, but he didn't get their ships, and he almost certainly didn't get the bulk of their liquid wealth, which would have been on those ships. The fleet represented the Templars' ability to move, to trade, to make war, and to escape. The fact that it slipped through the king's fingers proves the order was not caught completely by surprise. It suggests they had a contingency plan. What are we still asking? Who tipped off the Templars about the impending arrests, allowing them to get their fleet out of La Rochelle in time? Did the entire fleet sail to one destination, like Portugal or Scotland, or did it scatter to multiple locations? Is it possible that the fleet carried the main Templar treasury? And if so, where did that immense wealth end up? And could one of those ships sailing under the cover of night in 1307 have carried the knowledge and the means to cross the Atlantic and establish a secret colony in the New World? Number 10, were they guardians of the Holy Grail? The Holy Grail. No object in Western legend is more sought after, more mysterious, or more powerful. In Christian tradition, it is most often identified as the cup used by Jesus at the Last Supper, and later by Joseph of Arimathea to catch his blood at the crucifixion. It is said to grant eternal youth, happiness, and sustenance, and for centuries, the Knights Templar have been named as its secret guardians. The connection between the Templars and the Grail isn't found in mainstream historical records. You won't find a papal bull or a Templar rulebook that mentions it. The link comes from literature, specifically the medieval romance poems that first popularized the Grail story. The most influential of these was Parzival by the German poet Wolfram von Eschenbach, written in the early 13th century. In his version of the story, the Grail is not a cup, but a miraculous stone. And its guardians are a holy order of knights called the Templars. They live in a castle called Monsalvache, the Mountain of Salvation, and are chosen by the Grail itself. The similarities to the real-life Templar are impossible to ignore. Wolfram even claims he got the story from a poet named Coyote, who had found the original tale in an Arabic manuscript in Toledo, Spain, a place known for being a crossroads of Christian, Jewish, and Muslim knowledge. This literary connection has led to the enduring theory that the Templars' true, secret mission was not to protect pilgrims, but to guard the Grail. This would explain their obsession with the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Perhaps they found the Grail, or some other related relic, during their excavations there in the early 12th century. This incredible discovery would have been the source of their power and wealth, a secret they would protect with their lives. But what if the Grail wasn't an object at all? This is the central idea of the 1982 book The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail by Michael Bagent, Richard Lee, and Henry Lincoln. They proposed a radical theory based on a play on words in Old French. They argued that sangreal, Holy Grail, was actually a misinterpretation of sangreal royal blood. In this view, the Grail was not a cup, but the bloodline of Jesus Christ himself. The theory posits that Jesus married Mary Magdalene, they had children, and their descendants became the Merovingian dynasty of French kings. The Templars, according to this theory, were created by a secret society called the Priory of Sion to be the protectors of this sacred bloodline and its explosive secret. This theory, while hugely popular and the inspiration for the Da Vinci Code, is dismissed as pseudo-history by virtually all mainstream historians. There is no evidence for the existence of the Priory of Sion before the 20th century, and the bloodline theory relies on interpreting medieval legends as coded historical fact. Still, the idea of the Templars as guardians of something incredibly sacred is powerful. Whether it was a cup, a stone, or a secret about Jesus' family, it would explain why they were considered so dangerous by the church and the French king. A physical object like the Grail would have conferred immense spiritual authority, challenging that of the Pope. A secret, like a bloodline, would have shattered the very foundations of the church. The charges of heresy against them would then be seen as a cover story to discredit the guardians of a truth too dangerous to be revealed. What are we still asking? Did the medieval romance writers like Wolfram von Eschenbach have inside knowledge, coding a real secret about the Templars into their Grail stories? Is it possible the Templars found a physical object of immense power, like the Grail or the Ark of the Covenant, under the Temple Mount? Or was the Grail a metaphor for a secret Gnostic teaching or a historical truth, like the sangreal bloodline theory that they protected? And if they did have the Grail, where did they hide it before their destruction? Number 9, what is buried in the Oak Island money pit? Off the coast of Nova Scotia, Canada, lies a small, unassuming island called Oak Island. For over 200 years, this island has been the site of one of the world's most frustrating and expensive treasure hunts. And it all started in 1795 when a young man named Daniel McGinnis discovered a circular depression in the ground under an old oak tree. He and his friends started digging and soon hit a layer of flagstones and then a layer of oak logs every 10 feet down. They were convinced they had found buried pirate treasure. They were just the first. Over the next 2 centuries, numerous syndicates and treasure hunters have poured millions of dollars and even lost lives trying to excavate what is now known as the Money Pit. The pit is an engineering marvel or a natural nightmare, depending on who you ask. It is believed to be protected by a series of ingenious booby traps, including flood tunnels connected to the sea that fill the pit with water whenever excavators get close to the supposed treasure chamber. So, what does this have to do with the Knights Templar? The theory that the Money Pit contains the Templar treasure is one of the most popular explanations for the island's mystery. The argument is that pirates of the 17th or 18th century would not have had the engineering skill or the resources to construct such a complex structure. But the Knights Templar, who were master builders and engineers of castles and cathedrals, certainly would have. The timeline fits the Templar escape narrative. If the Templars sailed to the New World in the 14th century, as some theories suggest, they would have needed a secure place to hide their immense treasure and sacred relics. Oak Island, located in a sheltered bay in what is now Nova Scotia, would have been an ideal location. This is the area where the Templar-linked Henry Sinclair is said to have landed in 1398. The theory posits that the Templars used their engineering expertise to build the Money Pit as the ultimate vault, a place to safeguard their secrets until the time was right to retrieve them. Some strange discoveries on the island have fueled the Templar connection. A stone with a mysterious inscription was reportedly found 90 feet down in the pit in the 19th century. One supposed translation of the cipher reads, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds lie buried. While the stone has since been lost, its legend persists. More recently, the team featured on the History Channel show The Curse of Oak Island, led by brothers Rick and Marty Lagina, has found a number of intriguing artifacts. They have found a lead cross that appears to be of medieval origin, human bones dating to the pre-Columbian era, and evidence of extensive human activity on the island long before the 1795 discovery. Critics argue that there is no hard evidence to link any of this to the Templars. The Money Pit could be a natural sinkhole. The flood tunnels could be natural formations. The artifacts could have other explanations, like the whole story could be a combination of local folklore and wishful thinking by generations of treasure hunters. The engineering of the pit, they argue, is often exaggerated, and there's no proof it's as complex as the legends claim. Yet, the mystery of Oak Island endures because no one has ever gotten to the bottom of the Money Pit. Something is down there, and, whatever it is, someone, went to extraordinary lengths to protect it. The sheer scale of the project suggests a well-organized and well-funded group, not a handful of pirates. The Knights Templar fit that description perfectly. What are we still asking? Is the Money Pit a man-made structure? And if so, does it show an engineering capability consistent with the Knights Templar? Is the lead cross found on the island genuinely of Templar origin, and how did it get to Nova Scotia? Could the booby-trapped vault be the final hiding place of the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or the lost treasure from the Paris Temple? Or is Oak Island just a costly and dangerous geological anomaly that has fueled a 200-year-old myth? Number 8, why were they really digging under the Temple Mount? The official story of the Knights Templar begins in Jerusalem in 1119. A French knight named Hugues de Payens and 8 of his companions approached King Baldwin II of Jerusalem. They proposed forming a new monastic order dedicated to protecting Christian pilgrims on the dangerous roads to the Holy City. The king was impressed and granted them a headquarters in a wing of his own palace, which was situated on the Temple Mount, the former site of the Great Temple of Solomon. The new order was called the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The Temple of Solomon part is key. For the first 9 years of their existence, from 1119 to 1128, the Templars did very little protecting of pilgrims. They didn't seem to recruit any new members. There were just the original 9 knights. This has been called the lost years of the Templar Order, and it is one of their foundational mysteries. What were 9 knights doing for 9 years, living on the site of the most sacred place in Judaism, and one of the holiest in Christianity. The most popular and controversial theory is that they weren't patrolling roads. They were digging. The Temple Mount is a place of immense historical and religious significance. It was the location of Solomon's Temple, which was said to have housed the legendary Ark of the Covenant. The Ark was the chest that held the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. It was considered the earthly throne of God. The Ark disappeared from history when the Babylonians destroyed Solomon's Temple in 586 BC. Was it destroyed, captured, or hidden? Many believe it was hidden in a secret chamber deep beneath the Temple Mount before the city fell. The theory, advanced by researchers like Graham Hancock in The Sign and the Seal, and Christopher Knight and Robert Lomas in The Hiram Key, is that the Templars were not created to protect pilgrims. That was just a cover story. Their true mission was to excavate the ruins of the Temple of Solomon and recover the Ark of the Covenant and other lost treasures and sacred documents. This would have been a secret mission, perhaps sponsored by powerful figures in the church, like Bernard of Clairvaux, who later became the Order's great champion. If they found something, it would explain everything that came after. The sudden and powerful endorsement of the Order by the Pope at the Council of Troyes in 1129. Their rapid growth in wealth and power, their special status where they answered only to the Pope. What could give a small band of knights such incredible influence so quickly? Finding the Ark of the Covenant certainly could, or perhaps they found something else. Maybe they found secret gospels or historical records that told a different story of Jesus, a story the church would do anything to control. This knowledge would have been the ultimate blackmail tool, giving the Templars immense leverage over the papacy. Archaeological evidence is impossible to obtain. The Temple Mount is now the site of the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, making it one of the most sensitive religious sites in the world. No archaeological digs are permitted there. However, in the 19th century, a British expedition led by Charles Warren did explore the tunnels and cisterns beneath the mount. They found extensive underground passages and evidence of Templar activity, including Templar crosses carved into the walls. They confirmed that there is a vast unexplored world beneath the surface. So, were the first 9 knights really archaeologists on a holy quest? It would explain their 9 years of inactivity and their meteoric rise to power. It would also provide a motive for their ultimate destruction. They knew too much, or they possessed something too powerful for any king or pope to tolerate. What are we still asking? What were the 9 founding knights truly doing for 9 years on the Temple Mount? Was the story of protecting pilgrims a cover for a top-secret archaeological dig? Did they find the Ark of the Covenant, lost Jewish treasure, or explosive documents that challenged the authority of the church? And if they did find something, what happened to it after they were forced out of Jerusalem? Or number 7, did they possess the Shroud of Turin? The Shroud of Turin is one of the most mysterious and controversial religious artifacts in the world. It is a long linen cloth bearing the faint, ghostly image of a crucified man. Many believers are convinced it is the actual burial shroud of Jesus Christ, the image seared into the fabric by the miraculous energy of the resurrection. Skeptics argue it is a masterful medieval forgery. The history of the shroud is well documented from the mid-14th century onwards. But before that, its whereabouts are a mystery. And one of the most compelling theories is that for over 100 years it was in the possession of the Knights Templar. The timeline is what makes this theory so tantalizing. The shroud, or an object strongly resembling it, was known to be in Constantinople for centuries, where it was called the Mandelion or the image of Edessa. It was displayed to the public, but it was folded in a frame so that only the face was visible. In 1204, the armies of the Fourth Crusade, instead of fighting in the Holy Land, shockingly sacked the Christian city of Constantinople. The shroud disappeared during the looting. One of the leaders of that crusade was a man with strong ties to the Templars. Just over a century later, in the 1350s, the shroud reappears in the historical record in Laurie, France, in the possession of a French knight named Geoffroy de Charny. His descendant, also named Geoffroy de Charny, was a famous knight who was burned at the stake alongside the Templar Grand Master Jacques de Molay in 1314. The name is a striking coincidence. The theory laid out by authors like Ian Wilson in The Shroud of Turin and Christopher Knight and Robert Lomas in The Second Messiah is that the Templars acquired the shroud after the sack of Constantinople in 1204. They kept it as their most precious relic, a secret treasure that they revered in their private ceremonies. This would explain the charges against them of worshipping a bearded head or an idol. What the torturers were hearing about was not an idol called Baphomet, but the face on the Holy Shroud. The inconsistent descriptions given by the knights under torture make sense if they were trying to describe a faint, mysterious image on a cloth. This would also explain why the shroud was kept secret. Possessing such a powerful relic would have given the Templars immense authority, potentially rivaling that of the Pope. It was too dangerous to reveal publicly. They were its guardians, not its promoters. After the order was suppressed in 1307, the shroud was passed in secret to a loyal family, the de Charnys, for safekeeping. Geoffroy de Charny, who was burned with de Molay, may have been entrusted with this sacred duty. In 1988, radiocarbon dating was performed on a small sample of the shroud. The results dated the cloth to between 1260 and 1390 AD, a time frame consistent with a medieval forgery and seemingly debunking the Templar theory. However, the dating itself has since come under intense scrutiny. Critics argue the sample was taken from a corner of the cloth that was repaired in the Middle Ages and was not part of the original shroud. Other chemical tests have failed to identify any pigments or paints, suggesting the image was not painted. The mystery of how the image was formed remains unsolved. If the Templars did possess the shroud, it would add another layer to their story. It would mean they were not just bankers and soldiers, but the guardians of the most direct physical link to Jesus Christ himself. What are we still asking? How did the Shroud of Turin get from Constantinople in 1204 to Liry, France in the 1350s, and do the Templars provide the most logical explanation for its journey? Were the accusations of worshipping a bearded head a tortured misinterpretation of secret Templar rituals involving the face on the shroud? Was the 1988 carbon dating flawed? And could the shroud actually be much older? And if the Templars were its guardians, did they make copies? And could other true shrouds still be hidden away? Number 6. What was their true relationship with the Catholic Church? On paper, the relationship was simple. The Knights Templar were a Catholic military order, created and endorsed by the Pope. In 1139, Pope Innocent II issued a papal bull called Omne Datum Optimum. This document was the source of the Templars' incredible power. It placed them under the direct protection of the Holy See. It meant they were exempt from local laws and taxes. They didn't have to answer to any king, prince, or bishop. Their only master was the Pope himself. This made them a kind of papal super army, a force that could be deployed anywhere in Christendom without political interference. For nearly 2 centuries, this relationship worked. The Templars served as the muscle of the papacy in the Crusades. They were devout, disciplined, and effective. The Church, in turn, showered them with privileges and encouraged the faithful to donate land and money to the order, which helped them become incredibly wealthy. They were the ultimate insiders, the defenders of the faith, but beneath the surface, the relationship was far more complex and ultimately fraught with tension. The Templars' special status made them arrogant in the eyes of local clergy. Bishops resented these knights who could operate in their dioceses without their permission. Kings and nobles, while they used the Templars' banking services, were wary of an organization within their borders that held a higher loyalty to a distant pope. The Templars were a state within a state, and this bred jealousy and suspicion. The real mystery, however, is whether the Templars' private beliefs were truly in line with the Church's public doctrine. The charges brought against them in 1307 accused them of a shocking list of heresies, denying Christ, spitting on the cross, idol worship, and obscene rituals. The Chinon parchment shows that the Pope himself ultimately believed they were not heretics. But the question remains, were they completely orthodox? Some theories suggest the Templars, through their long contact with the Middle East, had absorbed Gnostic or esoteric ideas that were at odds with mainstream Catholicism. Gnosticism emphasizes personal spiritual knowledge, gnosis over orthodox doctrine, and the authority of the Church. If the Templars had their own secret inner circle teachings, they would have seen the public-facing Church as a necessary political structure, but not the ultimate source of truth. Their loyalty would have been to their own secret knowledge first, and the Pope second. This would explain the secrecy of their initiation rites. They were not just making a man a soldier, they were bringing him into a hidden school of thought. Another radical theory suggests the Templars knew a secret that could destroy the Church. This ties back to the idea that they found documents under the Temple Mount, perhaps Gospels, that contradicted the New Testament or proof that Jesus had a family. In this scenario, the papal bull Omne Datum Optimum was not a reward, but hush money. The Church granted the Templars immense power and wealth to ensure their silence. Their relationship was not one of loyal sons and a grateful father, but of blackmailers and their victim. For 200 years, a fragile truce held, but by 1307, with the Crusades lost and the Templars' purpose in question, King Philip IV saw an opportunity to break the deal, seize the Templars' wealth, and eliminate the threat they posed once and for all. This would reframe their entire history. They were not just victims of a greedy king, they were the losers in a 200-year-long Cold War with the Vatican. The Pope's eventual abandonment of them was not an act of weakness, but the final move in a long game to neutralize a dangerous rival. What are we still asking? Was the Templars' unique relationship with the Pope a sign of their loyalty, or was it leverage based on a secret they held over the Church? Did the Templars harbor private Gnostic beliefs that contradicted Catholic doctrine, even as they publicly fought for it? Could the charges of heresy, while exaggerated, have contained a kernel of truth about unorthodox rituals and beliefs within the order? And was the destruction of the Templars an act of political greed, or was it the Church's desperate move to silence a group that knew too much? Number 5, did they flee to Scotland and fight at Bannockburn? The Battle of Bannockburn in 1314 is one of the most important moments in Scottish history. It was a stunning, decisive victory for a small Scottish army led by Robert the Bruce against a much larger, heavily armored English force under King Edward II. The victory secured Scotland's independence for centuries, and according to a persistent legend, the Scots had a secret weapon, the Knights Templar. The story goes like this. After the Templars were arrested in France in 1307, many knights escaped. While some went to Portugal, a significant number are said to have sailed to Scotland. At the time, Scotland was a perfect refuge. Robert the Bruce was at war with England, and more importantly, he had been excommunicated by the Pope for murdering his rival John Comyn in a church. Because he was outside the Church's grace, papal decrees like the one dissolving the Templar order had no force in his kingdom. Scotland was a Templar-friendly zone. The Templars, in this theory, brought with them their wealth, their military expertise, and their fighting men. They allied themselves with Robert the Bruce, offering their services in exchange for sanctuary. The climax of this alliance came at Bannockburn. The battle was fought over 2 days. On the second day, just as the battle hung in the balance, a fresh force of well-equipped cavalry appeared on the battlefield, charging into the flank of the English army. The English, already weary from fighting, saw this new force with their strange banners and broke ranks and fled. The Scottish victory was total. The legend identifies this mysterious force as the Knights Templar. They were the elite heavy cavalry that turned the tide of the battle. It's a romantic and compelling story. But is it true? Historians are divided. There is no direct contemporary account of Templars fighting at Bannockburn. The Scottish chroniclers who wrote about the battle don't mention them. The fresh force is usually explained as the Scottish camp followers or small folk who, seeing the English waver, grabbed whatever makeshift weapons and banners they could find and charged down the hill, creating the illusion of a new army. However, supporters of the Templar theory, like the author John J. Robinson, argue that the absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. The Bruce would have had every reason to keep his Templar allies a secret. Acknowledging their help would have angered the Pope and the King of France even more. The Templars, as fugitives, would have also wanted to keep a low profile. The story, they argue, was passed down through oral tradition and secret society lore, particularly within Freemasonry, which has strong roots in Scotland. There is some circumstantial evidence. The Templars had significant landholdings in Scotland before their suppression. There are a number of Scottish families whose histories are intertwined with Templar lore, most famously the Sinclairs of Rosslyn. The first Grand Master of the reborn Templar order in France in the 19th century claimed to have a charter of transmission passed down from the Templars who fought at Bannockburn. While this is likely a later invention, it shows the power of the legend. If Templars were at Bannockburn, it would mean they didn't just fade away. They played a kingmaker role in the creation of an independent nation. It would suggest their influence continued, hidden within the fabric of Scottish nobility and secret societies for centuries to come. And what are we still asking? Who was the mysterious force that appeared at the critical moment at Bannockburn? Was it just a rabble of camp followers, or was it a disciplined unit of elite knights? Are there any hidden records in Scottish or Masonic archives that could shed light on a secret Templar presence in Scotland after 1307? And could the Templar influence in Scotland explain the unique flowering of intellectual and esoteric ideas there that eventually led to the Scottish Enlightenment and the rise of modern Freemasonry? Number 4, Were they heretics or martyrs? This is the fundamental question of the entire Templar saga. It's the question that was debated at their trial, and it's the question we are still debating 700 years later. Was the Order of the Knights Templar a corrupt, heretical organization that betrayed Christ? Or were they pious, devoted soldiers who were framed and brutally murdered for political and financial gain? The case for heresy rests almost entirely on the confessions. Beginning in October 1307, hundreds of Templars in France were arrested and interrogated by King Philip's men. They were subjected to horrific torture, stretching on the rack, burning of the feet, starvation, and sleep deprivation. And under this duress, many confessed to a shocking list of crimes. They said that during their secret initiation ceremony, they were forced to deny Jesus, spit or urinate on the crucifix, and exchange obscene kisses. They confessed to worshipping an idol head called Baphomet and to being encouraged to practice sodomy. These confessions were sensational and damning. They were used by Philip to create a public narrative of a monstrous, evil cult operating within the heart of Christendom. The problem is that the confessions are deeply unreliable. Torture works. You can make people confess to anything if you inflict enough pain. Many of the knights, when brought before the papal commissions where they were not being actively tortured, recanted their confessions. They said they had lied to make the pain stop. Jacques de Molay himself did this. He confessed under torture, then recanted, then confessed again under pressure, and then finally at the stake, he recanted for the last time, proclaiming his innocence and the innocence of the order. Dozens of Templars who tried to mount a defense of the order were rounded up and burned as relapsed heretics, a clear message to others to keep quiet. The case for martyrdom rests on the context of the arrests and the lack of any real evidence outside of the forced confessions. King Philip IV was massively in debt to the Templars. He was a ruthless and ambitious king who had previously clashed with the Pope and arrested a bishop. He saw the Templars as a threat to his power and a source of much-needed cash. The charges against them were suspiciously convenient. The speed and secrecy of the mass arrests suggest a military-style operation, not a legitimate legal process. And as we now know from the Chinon parchment, the Pope himself privately absolved the Templar leadership of heresy, even though he later caved to political pressure and dissolved the order. Most modern historians like Dan Jones and Malcolm Barber have concluded that the Templars were not heretics. They were the victims of a ruthless political takedown. The specific charges were likely a mix of slander and deliberate misinterpretation of their secret rituals. The spitting on the cross might have been a bizarre test of obedience, as some knights claimed, but it was not an act of genuine disbelief. They were a deeply religious, if perhaps arrogant and secretive order of Catholic warriors. Their real crime was not heresy. It was being too rich and too powerful. And yet, a sliver of doubt remains. Their secrecy was legendary. Their initiation rites were held behind closed doors. Is it possible that the order did have an inner circle with esoteric beliefs that were at odds with public doctrine? We may never know for sure what happened in those secret chapter meetings. The ambiguity is what keeps the debate alive. What are we still asking? Were the confessions purely the result of torture, or was there a grain of truth in the bizarre stories the knights told? What really happened during the Templar initiation ceremony, and could it have been so strange that it was easily twisted into something heretical? If they were innocent, why didn't more of them resist arrest? And why did so many confess? And ultimately, does it matter what they truly believed, or only that they were condemned by a system that valued power more than truth? Number 3, did they find the Ark of the Covenant? Of all the treasures the Knights Templar are rumored to have possessed, the Ark of the Covenant is the most awesome and terrifying. According to the Old Testament, the Ark was a gold-plated chest built to hold the 10 Commandments. It was the physical manifestation of God's presence on earth. It was a source of immense power, a weapon that could topple walls and destroy armies, but it was also incredibly dangerous to anyone who touched it improperly. The Ark was kept in the Holy of Holies, the innermost sanctum of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. And then, it vanished. When the Babylonians conquered Jerusalem in 586 BC, the Ark disappeared from the historical record. The most compelling theory about its fate is that it was hidden by the priests in a secret chamber deep beneath the Temple Mount before the city fell. And this is where the Knights Templar enter the story. As we've seen, the first 9 knights spent 9 years headquartered on the Temple Mount itself. The theory that they were there to excavate the ruins of the temple is one of the most fundamental Templar mysteries. And the ultimate prize of such an excavation would have been the Ark. If the Templars had found the Ark of the Covenant, it would explain everything about their subsequent history. It would be the ultimate relic, far more powerful than any piece of the true cross or bone of a saint. It would be a direct line to God. Possessing it would give them unimaginable spiritual and political authority. The Pope's backing, their wealth, their privileges all could be seen as the result of the leverage they gained from the single momentous discovery. They would have been quite literally the guardians of God's throne on earth. This theory is the central thesis of Graham Hancock's book, The Sign and the Seal. Hancock takes the theory a step further. He follows a trail of clues that leads from Jerusalem to a remote church in Axum, Ethiopia. He argues that the Templars, after finding the Ark, eventually realized it was too dangerous to keep in the war-torn Holy Land. They sought a safe haven for it. Hancock presents evidence suggesting they smuggled the Ark to Ethiopia, a country with a long tradition of Judaism and a belief that they are the true guardians of the Ark, brought there by the son of the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon. To this day, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims to have the Ark of the Covenant in a chapel in Axum, where it is guarded by a single monk who is forbidden to ever leave the compound. No one is ever allowed to see it. Could the Templars have been the ones who transported it there? They had the means, the secrecy, and the naval power to do it. It would have been the ultimate secret mission. The story sounds incredible, but the Ethiopian connection to the Ark is ancient and deeply held. Another theory is that the Templars took the Ark with them when they were forced out of the Holy Land in 1291. They might have hidden it in one of their preceptories in Europe. Chartres Cathedral in France, a church built with significant Templar influence and filled with esoteric symbolism, is one rumored location. Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland is another. The Oak Island Money Pit is yet another. Of course, there is no direct proof. No Templar document ever mentions the Ark. The whole theory is built on a foundation of circumstantial evidence, the 9 years on the Temple Mount, the rapid rise to power, and the enduring legends of a great hidden treasure. But if there was one secret, one treasure, that would be worth turning the world upside down for, it would be the Ark of the Covenant. What are we still asking? Did the Templars' excavations beneath the Temple Mount yield the greatest lost artifact in history? Is the claim by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church to possess the Ark genuine, and could the Templars have been the ones who brought it there? If the Templars did have the Ark, where did they hide it before their destruction in 1307? And could an object of such immense religious and historical importance still be hidden somewhere in the world, waiting to be rediscovered? Number 2, what was the nature of their secret knowledge? Beyond the legends of gold and relics, there is a more profound mystery surrounding the Knights Templar, the idea that they were guardians of a secret knowledge, a Gnostic or esoteric wisdom that set them apart from the rest of Christendom. This theory suggests their real treasure wasn't material, but intellectual and spiritual. This secret knowledge could have taken several forms. One possibility is that it was historical. As discussed, if they found documents under the Temple Mount that offered a different version of Christian history, for example, proof that Jesus survived the crucifixion or had a family, this would have been the most explosive secret imaginable. It would have given them immense power over the church, which based its authority on the Orthodox version of the story. They would have been the keepers of the true history of their faith. Another possibility is that their knowledge was philosophical or spiritual. The Templars spent nearly 200 years at the crossroads of 3 great civilizations, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. In the Middle East, they would have encountered not just soldiers, but mystics, scholars, and philosophers. They could have been exposed to esoteric traditions like Jewish Kabbalah, Islamic Sufism, and the lingering remnants of ancient Gnosticism. These traditions often offered a more personal, mystical path to God, one that didn't rely on the rigid hierarchy and dogma of the Catholic Church. The Templars, as a secretive order with a mysterious initiation process, would have been a perfect vehicle for transmitting such knowledge. The theory is that there was an inner circle of Templar leadership who were initiated into these deeper truths, while the average knight remained a simple, orthodox soldier. This would explain the need for secrecy. Sharing these ideas publicly would have led to immediate charges of heresy. And the symbols they use, like the 2 knights on one horse or the Baphomet head if it symbolized Sophia or wisdom, could have been part of this secret language of initiation. This secret knowledge might also have been practical. There are theories that the Templars were masters of sacred geometry, the belief that divine principles can be found in geometric forms. This knowledge, allegedly inherited from the builders of Solomon's Temple, would have been used in the construction of the great Gothic cathedrals of Europe, many of which the Templars helped to fund. In Chartres Cathedral, with its labyrinth and stained glass windows full of complex symbolism, is often cited as a prime example of Templar-influenced architecture, a building that is a textbook of sacred knowledge written in stone and glass. This idea of a hidden stream of knowledge passed down through secret societies is a central theme for many alternative historians. They see the Templars as a crucial link in a chain that stretches from ancient Egypt and Solomon's Temple through the Templars and onto groups like the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons. In this view, the Templars were not just a military order, they were a chapter in the secret history of the world. Mainstream historians, of course, find little evidence for any of this. They argue that the Templars' own writings, like their rule, show them to be pious and largely conventional Catholics. But the very nature of secret knowledge is that it isn't written down in official documents. It's protected, coded, and passed on only to the worthy. What are we still asking? Did the Templars possess a dangerous historical secret about the origins of Christianity? Were they initiates into a syncretic, mystical tradition that blended Christian, Jewish, and Islamic esoteric ideas? Was their wealth and influence built on a foundation of practical knowledge like sacred geometry and advanced engineering? And if this secret knowledge did exist, did it die with them, or was it successfully passed on to a successor organization that carries it to this day? Number one, where is the treasure? This is the ultimate Knights Templar mystery. It's the question that has fueled countless books, documentaries, and treasure hunts. When King Philip IV arrested the Templars on Friday, October 13th, 1307, he expected to seize a treasure of unimaginable wealth. The Templars were the bankers of Europe. The Paris Temple was the main treasury of the French kingdom. Philip was in debt up to his eyes. He thought he was about to solve all his financial problems. But when his men stormed the Paris Temple, they found it was almost empty. The great treasure was gone. What was this treasure? It was likely several things. First, there was the liquid wealth chests of gold and silver coins, jewels, and precious metals. This was the working capital of their international banking empire. Second, there were the land deeds, loan agreements, and letters of credit that were the basis of their financial power. And third, and most tantalizingly, there were the sacred relics and secret documents they may have accumulated over 2 centuries, possibly including the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or the Shroud of Turin. So, where did it go? The fact that it was moved just before the arrest proves, once again, that the Templars were tipped off. They had time to load their most valuable assets onto wagons and get them out of Paris. The most common story is that a train of wagons left the Paris Temple under the cover of darkness just a day or two before the raids. From there, the trail goes cold, splintering into dozens of theories. One theory is that the treasure was taken to the Templar fleet at La Rochelle and shipped out of the country. This is the most logical explanation. The ships could have taken it to safety in Portugal, where the order survived as the Order of Christ, or to Scotland, where it might have been used to fund Robert the Bruce's War of Independence. Or, in the most romantic version, it was shipped across the Atlantic and buried on Oak Island or some other secret location in the Americas. Another theory is that the treasure never left Europe, but was broken up and hidden in a network of secret locations. The Templar preceptories and commanderies were scattered all over the continent. The treasure could have been divided and concealed in countless secret vaults, under castles, in caves, or at the bottom of wells. The famous money pit at Gisors Castle in Normandy is one such rumored site. So is the mysterious treasure of Rennes-le-Château in the south of France. According to this theory, the treasure is still out there, waiting to be found, hidden in pieces across the landscape of Europe. A third possibility is that the treasure wasn't hidden, but was quietly absorbed into another organization. The Knights Hospitaller, the Templars' great rivals, were officially given most of the Templars' lands and assets by the Pope. While Philip IV seized everything in France, in other countries, the Hospitallers did inherit a great deal. It's possible that much of the Templars' portable wealth was quietly transferred to the Hospitallers as part of a deal to shelter fugitive knights and preserve the order's legacy in a new form. And finally, there is the theory that the treasure was never gold at all. Perhaps the true treasure was their secret knowledge. In this case, the wagons leaving Paris were filled not with gold, but with scrolls and codices. The true wealth of the Templars was their library of secrets, and this was what they saved. This knowledge was then passed on to their successors, whoever they may be. The missing treasure is the central plot hole in King Philip's plan. He destroyed the body of the order, but he never found its heart. The escape of the treasure is the ultimate proof of the Templars' efficiency, their loyalty to each other, and their secret intelligence network. They lost the war, but they may have won the final battle, ensuring their wealth and their secrets would survive them. What are we still asking? What did the legendary Templar treasure actually consist of? Was it golden jewels, sacred relics, secret documents, or all of the above? Was the treasure smuggled out of France by sea? And if so, where was its final destination? Or was it broken up and hidden in numerous sites across Europe, meaning parts of it could still be discovered today? And is it possible that the greatest treasure hunt in history is a wild goose chase? Because the true treasure was never something you could hold in your hands.